and also Lisa Conn. She talked about, and I think this was probably a really critical message, but you don't have to have a clear path before you start. You just need to take a step forward and then course correct again and again. And she reminded us as well that it's often the start that stops most people. So that intentionality and course correcting, and possibly has come to me at a very poignant time. I have a 17-year-old son. He's making a lot of choices around his career, as are many people going through not just school, but through life. And it's okay. It's okay to make a wrong decision. It's okay to course correct, but do it with intention. It's the core message that I was hearing. Make a decision, even if you've got this little dream and you're keeping it up in your head. And I thought to myself, I'm going to make a decision by the time I'm 45. So just make a decision, and then it's okay if you get it wrong.
Before we begin today's episode, I would like to express thanks as always to the incredible guests who shared their time, their energy, their wisdom with me for the benefit of you once again this season, and provided so much value. And importantly, I'd like to thank all of you, our listeners, spanning right across the globe. I have an appeal. So we continue to keep the podcast sponsor free and produce it at our own cost. So if you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please take 10 seconds now to do that, as it really helps the show and the quality of guests we can continue to attract. And when you find an episode useful, please share it with friends and your company colleagues. As ever, a huge thanks for all the really positive feedback and engagement on social media, specifically LinkedIn. So love to see your comments, love to see the engagement, love to get the insights from you and your own reflections. And if you're enjoying the podcast, why not subscribe to our ScaleX Insider 321 newsletter? We leave a link for that for you to subscribe in our show notes below. Now, without further ado, Claire, you're very welcome back to the ScaleX Insider podcast. Where have those last 3 months gone?
Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here, as always. Yes, those months fly by, and we're just heading straight into the summer.
So what's the plans for the summer?
What are the plans for the summer? I have a big event coming up at the end of July, and every day I have to admit that I question why I've signed up to this, but I have signed up to do a bike ride in aid of Simon community in Northern Ireland, which will take me cycling 300 odd miles from London to Paris. So I'm looking forward to that. Actually, that's a complete lie. I'm not looking forward to it at all. I'm in the middle of my training and it's really, really hard.
We spoke about this morning at our morning meeting, and you were called out for your determination. So well done you. And for the benefit of our listeners, every year on our ScaleX Accelerator program, we sponsor a place for a leader of a social enterprise. Last year, we had the wonderful Jim Dennison, who is the CEO of the Simon community. So what Claire and a couple of our other colleagues are doing, David and Sarah, are actually participating in a cycle for the Simon community. So well done you. It's brilliant.
Well, let's not move on too quickly, because you also have just completed a wonderful challenge for our current participants, the Cancer Fund for Children. Tell us about that.
Oh, it was quite incredible, Claire. Really, really, really special. A mini case study in all things scaling. We literally scaled 26 mountains across Ireland, so they're the highest 26 peaks across 32 counties. How do the numbers work there? Well, some of the mountains actually straddle 2 counties, so we traveled something like 2,600 kilometers over 9 days. We were climbing on average 3 mountains a day. It was incredible. The weather was horrific, but it just only amplified what was an incredibly special experience. The bond when you walk alongside someone. Over that course of time, we shared a bus. We had a little seat on the bus. We had made up our makeshift clotheslines to dry the clothes out between mountains. We really got to know one another. And at the end of it, it was incredible because at the beginning of the event, some of the participants were really, really struggling. And we were getting to know one another. There was 20 of us. We didn't all know one another to begin with. And some of us set off at a different cadence in the first number of days. But on the last day, something really special happened. We all walked behind the slowest person on the group, who happened to get stronger and stronger as the 9 days went on. And we all collectively reached the final summit together. We had our own anthem, which happened over the course of the 9 days. In a break of the clouds, we broke into song, "I Can See Clearly Now, the Rain Has Gone," and that became our anthem for the 9 days. And so we sang that as we approached the final summit, walking behind the slowest member of the group. And I think of the metaphor that we always use for scaling, which is our desire to see leaders scale their own summit. And we always warn them, or certainly caution them, that scaling will be futile if they charge up the mountain first and they look behind and they see their team members strewn along the mountainside, and they arrive there exhausted, worn out, not feeling fulfilled because they haven't brought their entire team with them, and maybe they've overly exhausted themselves trying to do this themselves and drag people up there. So they arrive there and they're a frazzled wreck. Maybe their relationships are in tatters, and their team are looking at them going, "Why did you bring us up here?" Contrary to what we coach, which is scaling with purpose, which is challenging yourself with a bold summit to climb, whatever that is for you. It'll all be relative to where you're at on your journey. And inspiring your team to climb with you, walking at the pace of the slowest member, and supporting that member to get stronger as you continue up there. And when everyone arrives there, what we want is the metaphorical high five. We had the literal high five with our anthem blurring out from one of the guys' portable music systems on his backpack, blurring out, and literally high-fiving. We want you to have the metaphorical high five, to embrace one another, celebrating the accomplishment together, and looking then at the next summit, feeling suitably accomplished and charged and ready to go again. So it was quite incredible, Claire.
With you. What a great reminder, though, of the importance of the journey, and actually equally the company that you're with. You've just called both of those things out. It's not necessarily reaching the summit, it's the whole process.
Well, even better than that, because given the weather, we couldn't actually see at the top of probably more than half of the summits. I would say even 20 of the summits. We couldn't see. We would have climbed for, in some instances, 3 to 4 hours. And when we got there, you couldn't see anything because the weather was so dismal. But actually the conversations that were shared, the bonds that were made, the getting to know one another along the way is, on reflection, what made this truly, truly special.
Wow, you weren't doing it necessarily for the views then. So a brilliant challenge, and actually don't overlook the amazing amount of money you raised for the charity.
Yeah, and this is a theme that I feel has really been consistent throughout this season, is the power of big goals, and the wonderful Roger who Johnson, who initially inspired us to join him on his vision, anchored in a really strong purpose, which was actually supporting children who are impacted by cancer across the island of Ireland. And he set out the challenge. The physical nature of the challenge was clear to everyone in terms of what this was going to require us to do. 26 mountains over 9 days, going the length and breadth of every county in Ireland. But actually, the financial goal, the financial target of raising £1 million, we all committed to raising £50,000 each. I hadn't raised on a personal level that amount of money before, and I don't believe many who had participated had. But as it stands today, and we all thought he was mad to begin with, and just before we actually participated in the challenge, he said, actually, folks, I have news for you, I'm raising the target. I'm going to raise it to 1.4 million. And we thought, oh, Roger, at least give us a chance to start, at least climb our first mountain. But given the momentum that was created, and I have to say, it felt like the whole island was supporting us. Today, we sit at 1.4 million pounds. So, see, the power of vision, the power of purpose, the power of setting goals, the power of one person's psyche, their mindset, to ignite something like this. It's, for me, it's just a mini case study in our 10 principles. So there we go. Thank you for asking. I indulged myself more than that I think your question invited, but thank you for asking.
Fantastic, really brilliant.
Well, look, tell me, look, this season, I mean, we've had guests from many different backgrounds and disciplines, from blitz scalers to round the world adventure racers. So just overall, what were your reflections from season 16?
Well, there was one big standout reflection for me this season, and it was all those amazing, wonderful women that you had on. You had 4 women this time. You had Caroline Adams Miller, you had Sam Smith, all of whom were fascinating. You had Dr. Sherry Walling, and you had Elisa Kahn. And I think, given that there is an absence of strong female role models for women going into business and women scaling up their business, there was some phenomenal lessons to take away from every single one of those women. So it was definitely a season of girl power for me this time round. Loved it.
Brilliant. Well, and I'm delighted you called that out, because I've challenged myself, prompted by Katie and her team as well, to encourage more female guests on. And I'm delighted this season that you've picked that up. So having 2 daughters and 1 son, I want to feature more wonderful female leaders. You know, we have a huge challenge in our own community to bring more female leaders in, and that's just the kind of the demographic that exists. There are more male SME leaders than there are females, but we want to showcase more female leaders like Sam, like Alyssa, like Caroline, like Sherry, who have been there and done it with bells on. So brilliant. Well, look, that's the standout reflection. In terms of emerging themes from this season, were there emerging themes for you? There certainly were for me, so it'll be interesting to hear from you what has been a consistent thread throughout the season.
So yes, there were emerging themes, and again, it is probably quite important to recap on, the themes that I tune into are the same messages coming out from multiple guests. And this time around, there was 2. So the first one that I want to share is the whole theme of intentionality. So going into things with intention and purpose, but at the same time, and these are 2 words that I hear all the time these days, not being afraid to course correct. So it's like an experiment. Go in, make your decision, decide what you want to do. But most of us along the line will decide to make tweaks, to make changes, maybe of significance, but not being afraid to course correct. And it started off with Dr. Sherry Walling. She described the concept of designing our own lives. She actually talked about designing your own career as well, and being clear on what you want, but also what others want. And she talked about, questioning ourselves as to why we're scaling in the first place. So are we scaling for fun? Are we scaling for money? Are we scaling because we're trying to prove something to ourselves? But also she made the point that as we scale and we evolve personally, if we're becoming someone that we don't want to become or we don't like, not being afraid to course correct. And then, of course, Casper Craven, your opening question, as you do with every guest, is what does scaling with purpose mean to you? And he talked about the first part of his life. He lived it without intention. I think he trained to be an accountant, and he went on then to become an investment banker up until the point where he participated in the BT Global Challenge. And that one was whenever he described spending 40 days at sea in some of the toughest conditions. And he described that moment as his first awakening and the first time that he probably opened his eyes to living a life with intention. Simon Squibb talked about it as well. He talked about, not sure whether he actually did pursue the route of becoming a lawyer, but he talked about how easy it would for him to take that traditional path. But then, because he was driven more through purpose than convention, he then started to embrace a career in entrepreneurship. And also Lisa Kahn, she talked about, and I think this was probably a really critical message, but you don't have to have a clear path before you start. You just need to take a step forward and then course correct again and again. And she reminded us as well that it's often the start that stops most people. So that intentionality and course correcting, and possibly has come to me at a very poignant time. I have a 17-year-old son. He's making a lot of choices around his career, as are many people going through not just school, but through life. And it's okay to make a wrong decision. It's okay to course correct, but do it with intention. Don't stumble through life. It's the core message that I was hearing. Make a decision, even if you've got this little dream and you're keeping it up in your head. Set yourself a time limit. I remember going through the same exercise myself in my early 40s. I kind of questioned whether I had a little bit more to give or whether I didn't. And I thought to myself, I'm going to make a decision by the time I'm 45. And I made the decision and I stopped torturing myself. And I think that bit gives us this sense of satisfaction that we're not thinking that we're not living what we're here to do. So just make a decision, and then it's okay if you get it wrong.
Oh, wise, wise words. There's a couple of things in that come up for me. One is the analogy that's often used when we talk about intentionality and course correction. When a plane takes off, it is constantly, because of the turbulence and the flight stream, it is moving off constantly from the GPS coordinates that were actually set, the destination that was set by the pilots before it took off. It's the pilot's job to constantly nudge the plane back on course. If they didn't, I think it's something like 60 miles for every 1,000 miles traveled, it will go off course. So if we were traveling from here to the US, we could be 300 miles off, land in a completely different state, a different city, if the pilots weren't course correcting constantly. So the destination's set, but those in the cockpit, those who have visibility of and an understanding of where they're going, it's their responsibility to recognize when they're off course and correct so that they're aligned to the course, to that destination. I love that analogy. It's one that I've heard before, but it's come up for me in the context of both intentionality and the importance of course correcting. I'm curious, we've coached more than 100 leaders now through our program. You've been in business for decades, at the leading edge of scaling businesses. Who has inspired you with the clarity of their intention?
That's a good question. Do you know what's on the tip of my tongue? You.
Ah.
You're always so clear. Like, as my business partner, whenever we went into business with simple scaling, you were always so clear in what you wanted. And I was kind of the opposite, but I went into it with a very open mind, thinking, I promise you, I'll raise the flag whenever I step into an area doesn't make me happy. And that's how we kind of have evolved, really, as a business. Your clarity of intention has always been really crystal clear. You weren't expecting that, were
I
you?
wasn't, and I wasn't inviting that either. And is that clarity really useful for you, Claire? And do you feel it's useful for others?
I think clarity is really refreshing. I probably would describe, I've probably decades of going into meetings and having to work really hard. I think you know how I think. And quite often I walk into meetings and I'm constantly listening and I'm constantly trying to strip back the noise to get to the nub of what the core issue is before we can make a decision on it. And I found it for decades, it's quite exhausting. And actually getting to the point where you've got something really clear and really simple provides so much capacity for a good discussion around making the best decision, as opposed to actually investing all your energy and your time into figuring out what problem you're trying to solve. So absolutely, yes. I know it's in two different contexts because we're talking about direction and clarity around the core issue, but I think there's a similarity there. Absolutely. Clarity is key.
Yeah, I love that. I feel as I'm hearing you there, I feel there's something practical we can invite our listeners to really hone in on, and that is in advance of the next meeting that you're going into, discern whether there's absolute clarity in terms of the agenda. What is the desired outcome? What does great look like? What's your intention in terms of how you're going to show up in that meeting? And what would make it a successful meeting? What can you bring which helps make the meeting even more potent, even more impactful? So there's a few things in there, but regardless, we're talking about clarity of intention, bigger picture in relation to maybe the next 3 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. But actually, you can start to practice that intentionality and having clarity with your next meeting, even the next meeting that you're hosting. Is it really clear why you're hosting this meeting? Does everyone coming understand why they're there? Are you intentional with the outcomes? Have you painted a picture of what great looks like? So just from a practical perspective, I think you've hit on something really, really important and very useful to those that are listening.
I think also there lies the power of a clear vision. Because whenever you've got a clear vision, you've got the overall direction defined. Everybody's aware of it. So actually, again, asking that question, will this help us arrive at that future destination any quicker, any easier? All those questions are very relevant, but having clarity around that future direction again serves a great purpose whenever there's a lot of noise that you've got to kind of siphon your way through.
Hear, hear. You mentioned two themes. So the first theme is intentionality coupled with the permission to course correct along the way. What was the second theme?
So the second theme, Dr. Sherry Walling put it best, and she described it as getting a sense of the landmines that can often sabotage our success. So she has great points to make. She goes on to say that there's a little child in all of us, born of fears that will kill us. And the sooner that we can identify those big emotions that will get us into trouble, the better. And really interestingly, Gay Hendricks talked about that as well. He says, and a number of your guests have talked about this too, but he talked about getting comfortable looking inside and understanding what might trip our upper limit switch. But he goes on to say there's one thing understanding it, but he says we have to be able to speak easily about three things. And he talks about speaking easily about our greatest fear or fears, speaking easily about our greatest sadness or grief. And the third thing then is speaking easily about our greatest anger. And I think that was also layered by Casper's advice around the importance of us discussing or asking those deeper questions. And he described it as the ones that we can feel in the marrow of our bones. So I think there's one thing understanding them and defining them, but getting to the point where we can speak about them easily to others is you're diving in quite deep there, but again, really important for us to do if we're going to avoid them sabotaging our success.
I'll not put you on the spot about your greatest sadness or your greatest anger, but what is your greatest fear in the context of business?
Oh, I was going to say that's easy. It's spiders. My greatest fear in business, it's probably quite a personal one, and I probably would have got to the point where I can speak quite easily about it. I think it's relatively common. It's not being enough.
Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I think maybe that's where my kind of drive and my determination comes from as well. It's constantly, I think if I go back to my school days, I often joke whenever I was going through school that, I was there to make friends. I totally bypassed the fact that I was actually there to learn anything at all. And I went through, and actually my friends give me a stern talking to whenever I said it was kind of wasted years. Although most of the friends that I went to school with are still in my life, so it wasn't wasted years, and I greatly apologize for saying that it was. But uh, I think because of that, I possibly came out of school feeling that I had to work hard, I had to try harder. And I was probably a little bit blessed in the fact that whenever I stepped into a career that I loved, so the world of people, the world of HR, the world of talent, where I spent my, most of my career, I knew I'd found something that I loved. And all of a sudden, I went off to do a postgrad and a master's, and I was absolutely thrilled because all of a sudden I was learning to do something that was making me even better. But I think that there was something still in me around this drive, around this determination. And it's quite quiet. I wouldn't be openly driven and openly determined, and I'm certainly not openly competitive. But it's that's a fear, and it's something that exists within me. It's probably quite a personal one, not so personal anymore, but it's a driver, and I think it has probably led to a lot of my success. But it's still there. It's not stopped me, put it that way.
It's interesting because if we go back to Dr. John Demartini and his spotlight on the importance of values as being the ultimate driver for success, what I've come to know about you over many years at this stage is that you value relationships above all else.
100%.
So where someone has relationships, not as high in their values hierarchy, this is where there is potential for friction. And I've had a conversation with someone recently, and they're having a challenge with their mother. And when I've come to understand why that is, their mother is a very religious person, and they're not. They're spiritual, but they're not religious. and most of the mother's demands are requests are one of religious nature, and they're both really good people. But I've witnessed the friction that's created because simply they're valuing different things. The daughter does not value the religion as high as the mother. It's her highest value. And despite the fact they're both really good people, and this is where the misalignment of values is actually creating friction.
It's actually interesting to look at the values, I think, as a whole set, because it would be interesting to understand how much maybe diversity or authenticity sat on the values chain, even though we've all got our own thinking and our own beliefs, as do I. I value diversity of thinking equally, well, maybe not equally, but it's definitely a value, equally as being authentic. And that means also me giving people permission to be their authentic selves. So I think we've all got our different beliefs and we've all got our different experiences through life. But if you value giving people the space and freedom to be themselves, which I think is everybody's right to be themselves, then potentially there could be less friction.
It's interesting. You mentioned Gay Hendricks, author of many books, but a wonderful book. I invite all our listeners to go and get a copy of The Big Leap. And in The Big Leap, he talks about this phrase that he's coined of upper limiting ourselves. And we see it within the context of our own ScaleX Accelerator program and our own community. Unbeknownst to those leaders, they're articulating an upper limit like, I can't get the people. Now's not the right time. What if we don't win that piece of business? What if it doesn't work out in that new market? What if our investors think we're mad if we turn up the boldness of our vision? We've heard upper limiting statements, for years, and there's consistent themes. Is there any for you, Claire, in terms of what you've heard from our own community for the benefit of our listeners? Because as we know, awareness precedes understanding, understanding precedes change. Often we're saying things and we don't even realize that by saying that, by voicing that, that we're actually voicing our upper limits.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think maybe it's more because of the nature of what I'm involved in at the moment. I see a limiting belief around letting go, around business leaders feeling that they have nobody to hand over to, or the people that they hand over to won't do it as well as they do. And it's really interesting, actually, because whilst, the workshops that I'm involved in at the moment are, giving the business leader a platform to share their future vision of the company with their team. And it's typically the first time that the team hear the vision for the first time. And then we facilitate a session where we deconstruct that down into a very actionable plan. And that's the practical side of the workshop, which is a really powerful workshop, I think, for the leader and their teams. But actually, the unstated power of that workshop, is the transition of ownership. And there's something quite magical happens within those workshops. And my view is that we simply give the team a platform to do what they have always been capable of doing. And, the line that we've heard all the time is the biggest waste in any business is the untapped potential of every team member. And it's quite ironic because sometimes you see the leader with the weight of the world on their shoulders thinking that they don't have time, they don't have capacity, but yet the biggest waste we know exists within the teams. And actually, whenever we're doing that and constructing that, and we're doing nothing more, the simplicity of it is we are providing a platform for people to step up onto, and they shine every single time they shine. And every single time the leader says, wow, I'm blown away by the capability that my team has shown me in that workshop. And it changes their view of letting go. But it takes that to happen. So it's a wonderful transition, harder to measure than the practical breaking down a vision and creating a plan. It's that, and you could almost see it happen. It's the transitioning of ownership into the team and really utilizing the full team as they should be.
Yes, you're also very modest there. I've heard feedback almost from all of those who have gone through this process who testify to the magic that is yourself in terms of how you host those planning workshops. And again, they play into your value, which is the value of human relationships, the value of bringing people together, the value you've always been a champion of as well, maybe as I perceive the underdog. So don't underestimate the fact that in Gay Hendricks language, in those sessions, you're operating in your zone of genius. You just
Yes,
can't see it.
probably am. It's good fun.
And you make it good fun, which are all the ingredients of someone who is operating in their zone of genius. They're energized by it. They're having fun doing it. They can't see they can't see the full value of what they're doing because it is easy to them, but everyone else can see it very, very vividly. So well done, you.
Thank you.
Are there any messages coming through from this season that really captured your curiosity? Anything that stood out? Any new models? Any new ways of thinking? New ways of framing things? Any language that would be worth calling out for listeners in terms of um, things that they might have missed as they've listened through the season?
Yes, I do have a couple of key messages. The first one came from Dr. John DeMartini, and he was brilliant. He was amazing to listen to. It was great that you got to do the podcast recording live.
Incredible, and a huge shout out to Seamus Fox, a friend of the show, who also has his own wonderful podcast, and Seamus enabled that, made that happen. So credit to Seamus.
Well, Dr. John DeMartini, he shared with us a line that actually really stood out for me was, why would you want to be second at being someone else when you can be first at being you? And one thing that we know exists a lot is comparison. And he says, as long as we compare ourselves to others, we will always be in conflict with ourselves. And quite often, he's talked about the injected values of external authorities. So, i.e., what drives other people makes us think that that's how I need to live to be successful. So whenever we see people and we hear people that we deem to be successful and we look into them, we compare ourselves with what they're doing against what we're doing, and then we see ourselves as a failure. And that's where it all goes wrong. And I've always had a real hang up about this. And I'm like, the amount of times I hear people talking about, what Jeff Bezos does and what Elon Musk does and blah, blah, blah. And I am like, I don't give two hoots about them. You're you and you're brilliant. Focus on yourself. But he said he describes this way better than I ever could. But uh he says we should be comparing ourselves in terms of how we're living against our highest value and testing how congruent we are with those values. And that's a revelation. It's like, stop comparing yourself to other people. Again, that line, comparison is the thief of all joy. It's like, know yourself and actually hold yourself to high standards, and it's much more fulfilling. So that's a real key message.
It's why I've come to understand how you absolutely love our own purpose, freeing leaders from business limiting fears to help them find the power of their own voice. Literally and metaphorically, it's about supporting leaders to shine a spotlight on their on where they're upper limiting and kind of helping them navigate through that so that they can become more of themselves.
Yes, it's all in there. It's all in there, and we have the luxury of helping to draw it out.
Yeah, it's such a privilege.
Brilliant.
Anything else? I mean, it was a very rich season, I have to say, in terms of the value that our guests provided, as ever. What else?
Okay, so the second key message I took was around something that's very important to me is happiness. And we've talked about this before. So I'm always checking in on my happiness barometer. Speaking of going into business with you, I made the commitment to you if I stepped into a place where I wasn't happy, I would flag it. And I think I've been having a little bit of a mental debate around it recently because I saw something I saw a long time ago, but actually somebody liked it on LinkedIn and it brought it back into my mind. You've likely seen it. Many people even listening to the podcast have likely seen it. There's an Australian comedian and he's called Tim Minchin and he talks about the 9 life lessons. He's delivering it to a group of graduates in a university over in Western Australia. And the second one, it's a really funny watch. It's really worth watching. But one of the life lessons is actually the second life lesson he talks about. He says, "Don't seek happiness." And don't spit your coffee out when I say this, but he says happiness is like an orgasm. If you think about it too much, it goes away. And he attests that we didn't evolve to be constantly content. So he had me questioning, my God, happiness. I think I constantly live in pursuit of happiness. Am I doing the right thing? So I was delighted to hear Caroline Adams Miller talk about the importance of happiness. And her theory is that the only thing that builds self-esteem is scanning our days for what we did that was hard. That was the first point she made. And I think, yes, you're right. If you think back into your past, you're thinking of the things that you did that you're really proud of achieving. And she said that there was a study that took place that showed that every single instance of this happened after we were flourishing. So flourishing being the key word. She also then said that there's 11 different words that make up the definition of flourishing. And one of those words is happiness. So therefore, happiness precedes success. So I'm kind of like, I've done a real big loop thinking I'm chasing the wrong thing, but now I've got good theory behind why happiness should be important. It's not just because it's a nice place to be, it also often precedes our success. So that was
Yeah,
a real key message.
I I found that again. I've gone down the rabbit hole of this for quite a number of years, but I found that quite a revelation because she has gone down the rabbit hole of the science of achievement and the science behind success. And what she's saying is it's not a case of that you will be happy when you achieve a certain revenue milestone, a certain profit milestone, a certain customer win. Of course, you will have that feeling of, yes, we've won it. But the important point to note in that is that in order to win, to achieve that success, happiness precedes it. So it's not a case of that the success makes people happy. It's happiness makes people successful. So this
Exactly.
brings us back to the very first principle of scaling, which is psyche. You know, you and I are both consistent in this. I mean, we are very deliberate about how we set up our mornings. We get up, we tend to, whether you're off walking Aussie, I'll get out for a run, I'll do some exercise, do some of the wonderful Wim Hof method breath work. It's not a case of rolling over and getting onto the news feed. I've deliberately moved away from looking at news, world news, for probably the last 5 years. I still get a little condensed feed through kind of FT for things that I have filtered that feed on. So I get news that is going to support myself, ourselves, in actually supporting SME leaders to scale with purpose. That's how I've filtered my news feed. So I'm still getting the news, but it's not, it's not murders and bombings and all of that, which is very sad, but actually we cannot do anything about that. It's not within our control, and it certainly doesn't make us happy in receiving that news. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to put ourselves in a state. We talk about either being in an empowered state or a disempowered state. You can only ever be in one of those two states. And through the podcast, I'm always curious to eke out from people, from those incredible guests, what can we do to actually consistently bring ourselves into that empowered state, which is ultimately consistent with happiness. It's about, people talk about their vibe, attracting their tribe, or good vibes, good life, all of that. What is that vibe? It's your resonance, it's the frequency you're operating on, it's the energy that you're bringing. We can walk into a room and immediately detect whether there's, oh God, I'm not feeling this, it's low energy, or walk into a room and feel high energy. I mean, when you strip it all back, we're just energy. So what we're encouraging people to do, back to the kind of the acronym that we really like, which is not Chief Executive Officer, but Chief Energy Officer, is bringing this all together, is being aware that do what you must to bring yourself to that empowered state, that happy state, because ultimately that will precede the success that invariably you're setting out to achieve if you're leading an aspirational scaling business.
Wholeheartedly agree. Absolutely. It's being more tuned in than you think you need to be to what brings you energy, and also what takes it away.
100%, and this is why, again, and many of our guests encourage this. That process, that habit, that ritual of reflection at the end of the day, by journaling. Where was I at my best today? Where wasn't I? What people, places, projects was I involved with that brought me into an empowered state? When wasn't I in an empowered state? And you start to develop themes about how you operate. And often we will be operating in an empowered state when we're actually, back to Dr. John DeMartini's whole essence, when we're actually doing work that's aligned with our values.
Very much.
So going back to season 15's wrap up, how did you progress against your commitments in the last 3 months? If you want to remind the listeners, first of all, what your commitments were, and then I'm keen to understand how you've got on.
This is like being back at school.
I have to hold you accountable, Claire.
I did okay this time.
What is it, a C+? Is it okay, a C+?
Way better. It's an A+.
Colvin, you can do better. Oh, okay, an A+. Wow. There we go.
So the last time, at the end of the last season, I was totally fascinated by Michael Bungay Stanier's decision tree. And it was a bit of a revelation to me. And I loved how he described, by defining the decision tree, which ultimately meant what decisions typically take place within your business and at what level as a leader. Actually, he described it as the founder you should be involved in. I thought that was absolutely brilliant, and a great tool for us as well to introduce to some of our leaders who do struggle to let go. And so I took it on and designed one for our business, for Simple Scaling. So you and I have had a couple of great conversations about it, really good, really deep conversations about it. We discussed it within our board, and we've got it to a point where we are ready to implement. We just need to do it when the timing is right. And the timing of that is really important as well. So thank you to Michael Bungay Stanier for introducing that. So tick, done.
Well done. A plus.
Yeah, thank you. Just need to implement. The second commitment was around listening to Alan Mullally, and I loved that he took the time to mine his past and to get real clarity around the lessons that he learned from his parents, and actually how those really helped to shape his decisions and the actions that he took in his life. So I think I maybe mentioned the last time, I'm so grateful for the grounding that my parents gave me, and I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into getting that clarity, and I think I've got great clarity around attributes. I've still a little bit more thinking to do around the lessons. Very briefly, so my mum has a quiet determination and a quiet ambition, and actually she personifies the quote, "You can do anything but not everything." So that I totally attribute to my mum, little June. And my dad is, you've met my dad. My dad's a real
The
traditional
wonderful
gentleman.
days.
The wonderful days, real traditional gentleman. He's a real people focus. Beautiful manners, great sense of humor. But the one thing that kind of makes him stand out, I think, is the fact that he wants to include everyone. He's a real entertainer and he likes to include everybody. And actually, he epitomizes, that quote by Maya Angelou that she says, "People will forget what you said and what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." And I want to dive a little bit deeper into both of those, but that really kind of epitomizes my dad. So there's a lot of lessons that I've learned from him over the years, and I really respected Alan Mullally taking that legacy from his parents and not forgetting it and recognizing where it came from. So I'm making progress there. Maybe not quite an A plus, but definitely a B, or but a little bit of work still to do on that.
Well, hats off to Des and June, because I get the benefit of working with you, having bringing both of their incredible attributes. So thank you, Des and June.
Lovely. Thank you.
So in terms of this season, look, what are you planning to do differently as a result? And I'm curious to get some commitments from you for the next 3 months.
Brilliant. Okay. So you've already sent me the link to this, but I was fascinated by Dr. John Demartini's work, and you've already sent me the link to his values assessment. So that's one of my commitments. And I'm wondering, are they going to be different to what I think they are? But let's see. And the second one, you might kind of choke whenever I say this, but so Elisa Kahn, she talked about, she in her book, she said at the back of her book, there's 14 different scripts which provide structure around having those deeper conversations. So I'm going to do a little bit of exploring, and we are going to have some conversations. And in the lovely words of Casper Craven, the ones that we feel in the marrow of our bones. So buckle up, brace yourself. We're doing this. So if I'm going down, I'm bringing you with me.
I'm going through a tunnel at the moment, Claire. I can't quite hear you. I'll call you back later.
There we go. We're in this together.
There we go. Right. Okay. On that note, let's pick it back up again. What were your favorite takeaways this season?
All right. Well, look, sticking with Dr. John, give yourself permission to be you in a world that doesn't want you to be. That was my first favorite timeless takeaway. And yeah, what a great lesson, and on how to do that by focusing on our core values. So a really simple process to identify what they are, and then just live up to them. Second one was from Chris Ye, and he said, understand that everyone is making it up as we go along. Nobody knows anything. Don't take people's advice for granted and ask people to explain it. And I think, what he was trying to say there really was that, most people take a fairly unpredictable journey through life, and they get to where they are by making the decision that seems the best decision in the moment. And I think that's kind of, there was a whole multitude of things there for me, because you know, sometimes people do things without actually realizing why they're doing them in the first place. And I've had a couple of examples of that recently where, you know, I've kind of said, what is that? Or why are you doing that? And people would shrug and say, I don't know, it's just because that's what I do, or I've done it always like this. So I think just yeah, just diving a little deeper and taking a bit of time to develop your own understanding and making the best decision that you can in the moment. So I love that as a takeaway. And my last one is a bit of a dual one. I kind of merged these together, but Gay Hendricks and Dr. Sherry Walling. Gay Hendricks reminded us of that lovely quote by George Bernard Shaw. And he says, I want to be thoroughly worn out before I'm thrown on the scrap heap. And that's just the best quote ever. And Dr. Sherry Walling then topped that off. She provided the little cherry on top when she said, play full out. And most importantly, have a great freaking time.
Oh,
So,
what a lovely, you've just put a gorgeous bow on what has been an incredible last hour. I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I really appreciate you, Claire. I appreciate the time you take to deeply think about the wrap ups and the messages that you want to communicate to our listeners. If you've missed a number of the episodes this season, hopefully this wrap up has sparked a level of curiosity to go back to those episodes and listen in full. Claire, I wish you a wonderful summer. Look forward to having you back on when we wrap up incredibly season 17, and that will be in the autumn time. So in the meantime, have a brilliant summer.
and you have a great time. And I'll see you soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.